This episode of the BeanCast is brought to you by Methodify by Delvinia. Get real-world customer feedback in hours, not weeks. Schedule your demo and get a free $20 Amazon gift card. Go to methodify.it/BeanCast and Methodify it today. Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 594, Schick, Schtick. For Monday, May 25th, 2020, it's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob North. Thanks for joining us. Among the many things that may change post-pandemic, could we also be forced to treat every customer as a new acquisition? The assumption of loyalty from past buyers is being called into question, and so tonight, we'll discuss winning back your customer base. Also, leveraging the video game spike, the impact if Amazon buys AMC Theaters, Facebook's new focus points, plus this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with a co-founder of brand consultancy Metaforce and an NYU adjunct instructor. Mr. Alan Adamson is here. Alan, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm looking forward to it again.
Now, also with us, we have digital consultant and co-host of marketing podcast Across the Pond, Mr. Samuel Mani is here. Mani, I got it right.
Hey, Bob. Thanks for getting my name right and repeating it multiple times to get the branding out there. I'm so excited to be here and looking forward to this week's show.
Yeah, I am as well. And finally, we have Associate Vice President of Marketing Strategy for Arizona State University and author of the book Specific, Mr. Adam Pierno joins us. Hi, Adam.
Hey, how are you guys doing this weekend? Great to be here.
We're doing great. We're doing great here in New York. Quarantine day, whatever.
2 million.
Day 572.
Yeah.
Well, there was this interesting article in Adweek that posited an assumption that I found fascinating. What they basically said was because shopping behavior has been so severely disrupted by the pandemic, marketing strategies that follow after the pandemic would need to consider every customer as a new customer. Now that kind of throws out the whole thing about loyalty and ongoing strategies for keeping people talking about you, and takes a whole new look at your customer base and says, hey, none of these people have any loyalty to us. We need to re-win them. We need to re-bring them into the funnel. Sam, is this hyperbole or is this good advice? And why do you think so or not? What's your thoughts?
So I could answer and argue both sides of the question based on what you just asked me. I will go for both and neither at the same time. The article is written by David Shim, who's the CEO of Foursquare. So that should also perhaps give some context and some context of who wrote it and what their perspective is. The idea, I think there's a core idea in here that there's this great reset, and so store visits will return to normal levels over time, but the beneficiaries of these stores won't necessarily be the same. And so is it that everyone is new and you should treat them all as new, or is it that forget everything you knew about those people and take another look, take a fresh look at them to see what they do, who they are, and why they are coming to you? For me, I think it's definitely, there is some truth behind actually, these are exactly the same people. Nothing's changed. They may have bought more, they may have indulged more, they are the same people. But there's more and more data to say that actually a lot of our behaviors have shifted over a period of time. yes, we're shopping online more, and especially in the US and some other markets, not across the world actually, in other global markets, online propensity is going down actually, or the the perception of what you're going to do for the next 2 weeks. But overall, we are going to go back. But I think the brands that have spent time building good relationships and doing the right things are going to have some semblance of stability, and you are going to get your loyal customers back and the loyal shoppers and consumers back. But I think we've also made acquaintances with brands and propositions which suck because we had to, and we had to kind of take what was there. And for those interactions and those relationships, I think we just reminded ourselves why we don't like these products, or why we don't like these brands, or why their service isn't great. So I think it's been a win for some people because they're physically available, but not for all brands. And I think we've fallen in love with other brands even more. So entertainment and other categories, we're seeing that our love for some of these propositions and brands is growing.
One of the things that bugged me about this whole question about whether or not we needed to go and start treating all our customers as new customers was, what does that do to the value of the data that we already have on them? And you mentioned that, Sam, and I'd like to bring Adam in on this to kind of weigh in on this thinking here. You mentioned that what we know about the customer may have changed. And I'm thinking that the customer data set that we have may be completely useless to us going forward if the customer has been radically shifted by this experience. I mean, if the customer has been radically shifted, we can't rely on the data and the knowledge of how they've acted before, because everybody's behavior is going to be different. And we need to wipe the slate clean in a manner of speaking and start to look at the customer in a much different light. Do you agree with that, Adam, or do you see some nuance on the question?
Oh, I always see nuance, Bob, as you know. Where my mind is, and as you really framed that very well, I would rather have some data from before on what we would call a prior customer that I can build on. And so at least I can adapt and say, oh, they were this before, and I haven't seen them for 90 days or 60 days or whatever it may be, and now they're behaving in this way. So there'll be a pause in the data set, and I'll be able to see some new behaviors. But I wouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater and start from scratch, or assume that people are coming in with no expectations or memory. They've already been set by customer experience. My anecdotal understanding of this is that at the beginning of going into isolation, a lot of people had a lot of high-minded thinking, like myself, about, oh, well, I'll use this time to improve myself or learn a language or A, B, C, D, E. And really, I haven't done any of that. I've watched a lot of Netflix, and I've talked to you a couple of times, Bob, which has been fantastic, but not really the elevated self-improvement that I hoped. As soon as we got a chance, the last place we went before as a family to dinner before we isolated was Chick-fil-A. The first place we went when we came out, Chick-fil-A.
Well, go ahead.
I think that's good insight in terms of the love and the preference. So you had a strong feeling about Chick-fil-A pre and post COVID. The chicken sandwich hasn't diminished in your world, but for me, I think I know there are other behaviors that have shifted. And when I was doing the research, the article talked about you have this muscle memory which lasts 2 to 4 weeks. But actually, when you look at the data about memory and how we actually work, the data says anywhere between 21 days and 260 days to form a new habit. So there is truth that will go back to what we always did. But there is also truth now that in a lot of places we've been in lockdown for 6, 8, 9 weeks, there is enough time for new behaviors and new mindsets and new beliefs and new values to exist, and new commitments. And so if we're tired of all this, in uncertain times and in difficult times, sad music stuff, and we want to be thinking ahead, we do want to aspire to be our best selves. We do want to invest in ourselves, maybe education or other skills that some people might have invested in. So I think we would have fundamentally shifted, and it's going to be a great sort of learning for researchers. But when it comes to the data piece, Bob, I think for a lot of the brands I've worked with, they didn't really have a great data strategy in the first place, especially a lot of the legacy CPG brands. So they aren't very good at this. They hadn't got a first-party data strategy. And what troubles me for a lot of those places is that in this time, they haven't made any effort to do it or to get better. So they've kind of said, hey, we're not in it. And now when people are searching for you, are looking for you, and actually are seeing much more traffic digitally as well as potentially, physically, they haven't made any efforts to build the infrastructure to create data, to improve their ability to do it. So I think the winners will actually win disproportionately more, and the laggards are going to lose disproportionately more because they haven't ever taken it seriously, and now they're kind of screwed.
Yeah, that speaks to the timeliness of the Frito-Lay Pepsi DTC offering and the how fast they got that thing up and running. I'm sure it was in the works, but they got it accelerated for this isolation periods just for that reason. It's less about habit and probably more about data,
right,
in my opinion. They're trying to build up a set of data so that they have something to launch off of, per this article, in that same mindset that let's have some current relevant data.
Something that was interesting about this article for me was that it seemed like it was skewing more toward retail than products. Like it seemed to be implying that retail needed to rethink the way that they treated customers. And, it assumed from a brand standpoint that everybody would have to treat everybody as a new customer, but it seemed focused on retail. And I'm wondering, Alan, do you see CPG, automotive, some of the big ticket items, do you see some of them having to re-win the customer base back in this new world post-pandemic?
I do think, as you just alluded to, that it's going to have a more dramatic effect on retailers or companies that go to market primarily through retail. As other disruptions, what often happens is it accelerates changes that were already underfoot, and it just forces things fast forward. So I do think retailers who used to assume people are just going to go to the store to buy things are going to wake up when this is over and finding lots of people are not coming in, and or if they're coming in, they're expecting you to drop it in their trunk or have it ready so they can pick it up. So their expectations about what the traditional retail experience is no longer browse the aisle and put things in a cart and line up to check out. So all the things that Amazon was working on in terms of just walking through the store, putting stuff in your bag and automatically checking out, I think all that's going to accelerate. I don't think, and it's going to have, I think, another big effect on the automotive business. That hasn't changed still. You still go to a dealership where there's some cars, on a showroom floor, and maybe a salesperson who knows 10% more about the car they're showing you than you've done in your studies online. And I think that's going to dramatically shift. I think people are going to expect that if you want to buy a car, the BMW dealer is going to have to drive it by your house, come in, take you for a drive, and you don't like that, I'll bring another one over. So I think certain categories are going to be more dramatically impacted, and I don't think consumer packaged goods are going to be at the top of that list.
Would you agree with that, Sam? I mean, you come from the CPG background, heavy CPG background. Do you believe that CPG is kind of immune to this, or will it also be affected mainly because of the advent of a lot of DTC brands doing quite well during the pandemic?
Well, what we realized that I want it and I want it now is the human behavior. And so, yes, I do believe legacy brands are going to suffer for a couple of reasons. Firstly, a lot of people started buying things because the end of times were about to happen. And so they were hoarding stuff. But if you bought single ply toilet paper because that was the only thing left, you've kind of found out why you hate single ply toilet paper, and you'll never buy it again. You just probably got more of it. You're perhaps buying brands in the food category that are nostalgic, but you kind of reminded yourself that I only eat this stuff when I think everything's going to go to hell. I'm not going to buy these brands again. So I think there's going to be an association with negativity, with bad times, with down times, with fear, not than positivity. And then the other thing is, a lot of the CPG brands were kind of resistant to DTC, going direct to consumer, and they haven't changed. And in 9-10 weeks, they haven't done anything to do things differently. So they've given up that land. That land grab to the existing direct-to-consumer brands, and they're not going to get it back. So I'm saying, even if you come and try and play in that space now, you're going to be so much further behind. But also consumers have chosen other brands. So I think Heinz is another brand that did this in the UK with a big a box of their stuff and trying to get direct to consumer in this time frame. So if you innovated quickly, yes, you have a right to win. But I think if you're now going to try and do it later or just put it off completely, I think you're doomed. So expect large legacy CPG brands to lose significant market share and not be able to regain it, and not even be able to use pricing and lower price and that kind of thing to get you back.
Well, one thing that's changed quite a bit over the time that we've spent indoors is that there's been an exponential growth in video game sales, and that means advertising has a lot of opportunities. A lot of opportunities in a space that has been already flourishing, and we've been exploring this many times on our show in the past. We're going to get to that in just a minute, but first I want to talk about our sponsor for this evening, Methodify by Delvinia, and give you a chance, or someone you know another chance, to get a $20 Amazon gift card just for checking them out. And we know Amazon's doing quite well, so these are very valuable. This is like gold they're offering you. Now, behind every brand are real people like you or me or your coworkers or employees, and they're all making decisions. And if you're making those decisions right now, you're doing so while in a very stressful situation, often extremely stressful situation. And you're talking to consumers who are also highly stressed and very sensitive. You say one wrong thing in your advertising and you could unleash a social media firestorm against your brand. Who needs that? We've already got a pandemic. We don't need more of that. This is where our sponsor, Methodify by Delvinia, can help. Methodify collects real feedback from your actual customers on concepts or creative before you release it into the world. And the whole process, the entire process, takes hours, not days. Methodify gives insight professionals and senior marketing people the information they need to power better decisions that will protect their brand and themselves. Now, just a few weekends ago, Methodify was used to test digital creative for a fast food chain to make sure the messaging wasn't tone deaf. Now, they walked away with some invaluable information that helped them to avoid costly mistakes, and Methodify can do the same thing for you. Actual customer feedback is the game changer in this equation, because right now, brands that wait and see and just take this hold it until we can find out what happens in market are going to wind up making costly mistakes that cause all kinds of problems down the line. Now, of course, I encourage you to connect with your customers. I encourage you to build relationships. I encourage you to build trust, build fans. But test everything right now. And Methodify can get you started today to test everything that needs to be tested before it goes to market. Now, to find out more about Methodify and to set up a demo, just Methodify it. Go to methodify.it/BeanCast. That's methodify.it/BeanCast. And as a way of saying thanks, every BeanCast listener who signs up and completes the demo will receive a $20 Amazon gift card just for your time. And don't keep this to yourself. If you know somebody who's in your business, an employee, a coworker, an associate, someone who's working at another agency or another brand, give them this information. They'll thank you for it. So again, that address is methodify.it/BeanCast, and we thank them very much for their support of our program. Well, video gaming has long been on a growth curve. We can watch it as like a hockey stick with all the involvement of video games, both casual gaming and hardcore gaming. But during the weirdness of the last few months, that growth has been vastly accelerated. I mean, it's crazy, the numbers that MPD, the reporting company that deals with the video game industry, the reporting numbers are showing sometimes 300% increases. I mean, they're just crazy. Adam, will this change in consumer media preference continue after the pandemic? And if so, how should brands get involved? What's the best way for brands to dip their toe into the video game market and get the most from their ad dollars being spent there?
Well, number one, yes, I think this is going to continue. As you said, it's a hockey stick now, but it was a hockey stick before. I mean, even going back years, you had seen video games overtaking, feature films, for example. as a form of entertainment, and both in terms of income coming in for the biggest video games versus not every blockbuster, but some of the bigger movies, and time spent for sure. The people who love games are super loyal. What struck me about the article, the analysis from NPD, and then the article we read, is not just that video games as a category are huge right now. That's not that surprising, but the breadth of the types of games, and that's germane to my answer to your second question. If I look at Final Fantasy VII, if I look at Call of Duty, then Animal Crossing, NBA 2K, they're so different in the types of games and in the way that people play and consume them, that the answer is there's really no one size fits all for brands and for advertisers to jump in there. And I think that could be most relevantly seen by Amazon jumping in with their own introduction into gaming called Crucible, which is looks like a Fortnite competitor to me. I'm not a heavy gamer, but know it well enough to know that it's kind of a battle royale type game. And that might be more of a, like a lot of things Amazon does, it might be more of a data play than actually a traditional advertising play. So what we've seen work in the past is, as esports have climbed in popularity and have become more mainstream, especially as traditional sports have been on hold around the world during the pandemic, the idea of sponsoring players, sponsoring teams, wrapping the stream or wrapping the competitions with branding and logo, kind of like the way they sponsor football or soccer around the world, a logo over the game. What has always struck me weird is the NASCAR approach of, let's take Grand Theft Auto and put a McDonald's logo in the middle of a scene where there's murder and crime happening. It just doesn't make sense, and it always sets brands up for weird gifts and weird trouble spots. So I think because there's such a wide array of platforms, players, also streaming, broadcasting rights, there's not really a one-size-fits-all approach, and nobody's really cracked the code on the best way to do it. But I will bet if you call the TV sales rep, they will certainly have an idea for you. And if you call someone in Amazon or Twitch, they will have a response for you. If you call Nintendo, they'll say, absolutely no ads, get out of here. We don't want that.
Well, that's one of the things I wanted to bring up. I mean, not every video game is in the market for some brand placement within the content or some interruptive ads or some banner ads or some app install ads. I mean, sometimes it's like you mentioned, Nintendo. I mean, they're never going to sell ad space within one of their games. It's just not within their DNA. However, there are lots of opportunities to do cross-promotion with video games, and that is something that I don't think a lot of people think about. They think about the opportunity to get on the actual content and put an ad in front of the user and to leverage the attention that way. But there's also the hype surrounding the launch of a new game and whether or not you're doing some kind of event or, like I said, promotion that involves your product in association with their content without having the two blend together. Alan, are you seeing a lot of people doing stuff like that? I mean, is that something that's growing, or is that something that is an opportunity that's yet to be experienced at any kind of level right now in the marketing world?
I agree with you. I think, getting content into any video game, short of, a stadium, FIFA, or NFL, football, where you can just, use it like it's used at the stadium, but trying to get content, add content into lots of games is a tricky endeavor. Because the audience is pretty sensitized and they're focused on exactly what they're doing. They're not looking necessarily in peripheral vision. So I think that the more likely approach, as you indicated, which is understand those gamers are into those games and try to do cross promotions, try to do events with them. Use that in a different way other than trying to, squeeze content into their eyeballs while they're playing the game. So, and I don't see a lot of that having gone on yet, but I think it's far more, it's got plenty of horsepower left in it.
Yeah, I referenced movies earlier. I think I could see Animal Crossing on a McDonald's Happy Meal, although adults are playing it as well as kids. I think that's a nice place that used to be the territory of Disney, and then ultimately, DreamWorks Animation took it over. But there's ways to go back to basics and go back to some of the traditional things that work, where you're really trying to capitalize on reach and aligning your brand with that experience of playing that game.
Yeah, you bring up Animal Crossing. Obviously, I'm a player. I think I've made no, I've made no bones or tried to hide that fact from anybody. I've been slowly building up my world in this pandemic. It's been just a cathartic experience. I'm wondering though, Sam, this has been such a cathartic experience for me in the pandemic. Will it have a negative impact? And we'll see maybe a pullback from video game usage after the pandemic. People are going to be eager to get out. They're not going to want to be focused on their screen as much, possibly, after they're been doing nothing but watching screens the entire time for the last few months. Is that going to negatively impact video games for at least the short term?
I think the growth rates that we're seeing and reported of sales are probably not going to be sustained. So there was a one-time bump that's going to drive it disproportionately. But there is likely to be a legacy sort of effect of people just more engaged, and this escapism and entertainment and fun, just rediscovering video games. I think people coming in aren't just existing, they're kind of new people coming into the category. As I was also thinking about it, it's funny because I was watching, this probably says a lot about me, I was watching the Formula One, whatever that video game version of it is, and I was watching that and I was thinking, wow, these graphics, it basically is the same as the real thing. And worse still, I actually preferred the video game version than the real version. And I thought, this is actually more fun. There was something more entertaining because the drivers weren't these faceless usual suspects who were experts. There was more jeopardy, I think, involved. And then it just got me to the branding. So a video game version of Formula One, motorsport, I don't see any different participating in that versus in the real event. It's probably going to be a heck of a lot cheaper and a heck of a lot more scalable. So I think there's going to be contextual opportunities that are created. But I know this question is also about video games, but there's also data that shows overall toys, overall board games and jigsaws and lots of other things have grown as well in this environment. So I just think there's more opportunities for marketers to think about context, to think about content, and then to think about their audience. And that old cliche of gamification that we as human beings love. I just think brands can play into that so much more in terms of partnerships, collaborations, and original content or original narrative that shows up, be it in video games or offline traditional games. So I just think this whole space of gaming, big G for gaming, is a huge opportunity for brands engage with consumers in a way that they have fun. They're kind of just escaping and tapping into different skills. And then final point I'll make is a lot of this stuff in video games is being linked to positive impact of mental health in terms of giving people different opportunities just to get a step away from the day-to-day, which is a bit tough right now. So there are actual other drivers of why people are getting engaged. And again, I would put all those together as a marketer and say this is an opportunity to reconsider and take seriously, but just don't treat it just like traditional media.
Why do we think about creation of branded games? I mean, most of the time I feel kind of, meh about video games that are created by brands. There's only been a few successful attempts at it. One of them's out right now. I mean, I was had it on my list of potential competitors for the fair for this week, but Schtick, the razor company, or Schick, I guess it is. Schtick would be a whole other thing. But Schick Razors is doing a charity associated video game that's actually pretty fun. I mean, it's taking a pandemic meme of people shaving their heads, and it's showing your little character skates over top of people and shaves their heads and tries to avoid the shaving cream bottles. And it was actually pretty fun to play. And I'm wondering, and it had a good cause too. I mean, it was donating money to a charity. So, I mean, what do you think about that, Alan? I mean, it's just like, is that something that would be advisable for brands, or is it so hit and miss and so much about the tastes of the users that it could potentially be a rat hole of wasted effort?
It's tricky because most brands, most manufacturers are just not that great at creating content. They're pretty good at interrupting content when they buy it, but except they're not, their skill set is not great content creation of any type. from from video to, and gaming is even somewhat more difficult. So I think, yes, Schick can do it for, a short-term promotional thing, but are you going to be playing that when you're set free from your apartment? Probably not. So I think it's just a high bar to come up with a type of gaming experience that's going to be competitive for a share of mind for heavy gamers.
Well, good points, all. I think we've run out of stuff to talk about that. Let's move on. I wanted to talk next about Amazon. Amazon is reportedly getting involved with buying AMC theaters. This is AMC, the theater chain, not AMC, the network. Stocks soared in the news that Amazon was entering into talks to acquire the cinema chain. Alan, what would such an acquisition do to the movie business to have Amazon's marketer-focused approach to entertainment applied to films in the theater at this scale?
It's unclear. About 7 months ago, for your listeners, in New York, there was a very famous art house that played terrific movies called the Paris Theater, and that went under. And about a month after it went under, and it was one of the few places you could go to see quality films in Manhattan, Netflix announced they were going to buy it. And there was a huge sigh of relief for all of Manhattan, that at least the Paris Theater would be there. And I went there after it was taken over by Amazon, and desperately, not Amazon, Netflix, and they desperately need new seats and, probably better screens. But I sat there and watched a Netflix trailer of all the Netflix movies coming up, and it was an incredible venue to see how much great content Netflix is going to be doing. So I think part of it is the same thing for Amazon. It gives them a channel through which to preview and promote their own content. However, the challenge is that AMC is huge. If you haven't been to an AMC theater, most of them, the popcorn concessions are closed in half the theater. They've been cost reducing that AMC experience to the point where, I'm not sure they take the chewing gum off the seats anymore because they don't turn the lights on. And I think Amazon is perhaps good at a good tight retailer and knows how to save every penny. AMC's already done that. And the final point I'll make is that Sony for years owned theaters, a couple in New York, a couple in LA, and I had the privilege of having Sony as a client a couple times. And during one of my times, they made the decision to take the Sony name off the theater. And there was a bit of a debate because it was a great way to bring Sony to life, other than buying a television set or a piece of music equipment. And they own Columbia Pictures, so they had some content. It was a vertical integration story. But ultimately, Sony was a manufacturer and was terrible at running a theater, which is a very complicated thing to do. And they were concerned that the decreasing value of the decreasing appeal of the Sony theater in Manhattan was going to damage the Sony brand and prevent you from spending a lot more money on a flat screen TV or something else. So for Amazon, other than buying a few theaters like Netflix did to showcase some content and to make certain films eligible for awards, I can't see them being great at running 1,000 screens and making that experience, which has already been cost reduced to misery, any good.
All of your points are well taken, and I actually agree with most of them as far as they go. But for me, I'm more concerned about the fact that Amazon being so data-driven could affect the entire distribution film studio structure in a negative way. I mean, they already have it down to a science. When you do a retail store for the Amazon bookstores, they know which books are going to be most popular, where to put them exactly in the store, in order to get the highest volume per square foot of any retailer in this space. And they know it because of the data that they've crunched from having people, view items through their website. So they're applying that data model to the way that retail works to get additional value out of it. What I'm wondering about is because they've got Amazon Prime and they're going through this large back catalog of movies showing, all kinds of different genres, will that give them additional leverage when negotiating with film studios and distributors for getting content into their theaters that no other theater chain has ever had? I mean,
Yeah.
Sam?
Yeah, I fully agree. There's some play there which involves Prime, the data, some sort of loyalty or membership sort of relationship with Prime and distribution, whether it's early access or combined access, physical ticket and Prime combination, or data and which movies get played where. They're up to something.
But even more than
Absolutely.
that, be able to go to the studio and say, no, you shouldn't greenlight that movie because our data shows us that this won't do well.
Exactly. Or please use this, or include that product, or product placement. So there's influence, and I guess because if you look at the valuation from what the reporting saying, this chain was worth 1.4 billion less than a year ago. Now it's 250 in terms of 250 million market capital. So that's loose change out of Jeff Bezos's pocket to buy it. And I guess you get other plays like real estate and other things. So I just think there's a savvy data strategy, or at least some sort of power play that it gives you. And if it doesn't, no harm, no foul, because it's really a rounding error on the size of the business and the profit they make if you get it wrong anyway. So I see a synergy. And then the other thing I was thinking about, I don't know about you guys, but I absolutely hate the Amazon Prime menu and interface. The UX is awful. So I'm just thinking you might actually get more traction and fall through to your online content, your digital content, if I see some of it in the kind of, as you say, on a big screen. So you described the Netflix experience when you saw it on a large screen and thought, wow, it was more engaging, because I struggle to find stuff on Amazon and just playing around with it. So I think there's some synergy in terms of creating some sort of engagement from your existing consumers, but there's definitely, I just think, a data play or a loyalty play. Maybe you get exclusives or additional content online. If you sign up to Prime, you get the movie experience and you get some sort of digital extra or something like that. But as far as I'm aware, running a movie theater, the business model is in your $20 bottle of water and your $55 small box of popcorn. That's the only way they kind of make money anyway. They're not really making money from actually the movies themselves. So
that's
there's got to
because
be another play.
That's the perfect.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go
ahead. Adam, you
go.
go.
Perfect place for Amazon to jump in. So what they've done with Whole Foods, how they've optimized that, and how they've built their Amazon Go prototype stores, they could add some of this. Is wishful thinking from someone who doesn't have to roll up his sleeves and do it for sure, but they could take some of those technologies, apply them to theater going, and then Bob, you referenced the data collection and the data optimization they have. They could say, oh wow, when we show a Liam Hemsworth movie, we sell 10% more cherry Coke. Let's make 10 more Liam Hemsworth movies and get a deal on syrup and figure out how to make this all go. I can really see them. I mean, what Amazon seems to do is come in at a bit of an even cast or a loss and figure out how to milk it and make it work for them quarter over quarter over quarter just to get it built into their empire.
This is their strong suit, which is retail. And that's essentially what a movie theater is. It's a retail experience. And you're right, Sam. Most theaters make their money by overcharging on the amenities and not on the theater tickets themselves. These extra concessions are what drive most of the profit. But that doesn't mean that it can't be flipped. I mean, the reason movie theaters lose money is because you don't get enough butts in seat for every single showing. And if you put enough butts in seats for every single showing, you would have a very successful operation without having to overcharge for the concessions. And I'm wondering, can Amazon crack that nut? I mean, Alan, what is your professional opinion? Can they crack that nut?
Well, I think everything you said and the team has said here, first, the category is ripe for disruption. There's very few good movie theaters experience are all under pressure. And now, so the category is ripe. And of course, as you pointed out, it's selling for 2 cents on the dollar. So, Jeff likes to buy low, and this is a perfect opportunity because, he's getting it on a fire sale, and it's going to be a fire sale for a while, and because people aren't going to run out to the movie theaters the minute they break out of quarantine. So I do think it's ripe, and they do have pockets to do it, and I do think it's going to have to be more than just, reupholstering the chairs and upgrading the popcorn. It's going to have to the experience needs to be reimagined, and since they also are making a big play on the content side, having distribution. The reason Netflix bought The Paris is to have that channel to be more of a legitimate competitor to move for Hollywood talent to compete with the studios. And if Amazon owned AMC, even if they closed a third of them as money losers and moderately reinvented it, they could probably make the payout just by being a more effective competitor on the content front.
You talk about the experience. I'm just realizing, was it Amazon that are creating this Lord of the Rings series show on their channel? So I can imagine that getting those sort of diehard fans and creating some sort of event where they screen them back to back in those exclusive theaters and give you that experience. So if they've got the right content, they could actually turn it into a premium going out experience and get those diehard fans and those passionates about certain shows or platforms and get them involved. So there is you're talking me back into it now. I'm seeing a strategy here which could reimagine the cinema experience, which can do with a lot of reimagining right now.
And that's what they do. That's their entire shtick right now, is trying to reinvent the retail experience, whether it's online or offline. They're trying to make it take away as much friction as possible from the buying experience, and ultimately to have a piece of every transaction in every market. It's scary. It's brilliant, but it's scary. It's kind of mad genius type stuff. Well, we're going to move on to our final topic of the evening. Facebook has responded to the pandemic with two distinct efforts. First, the creation of shops to help small business create an e-commerce solution. And second, a refocus on groups as a primary means of interacting on the service. Sam, since we were just talking to you, I want to go back to you here. What are the implications of these moves, and do you feel like each of them is strong? Let's start with shops. What do you think about shops? Is that a good move? Is it good for retailers, small retailers to get involved with, or is it just kind of an also-ran and it's not as good as Shopify? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's powered by Shopify. Shopify is one of the platforms they're using. But if you listen to the last topic and this topic, the question we should ask ourselves, do we want the whole world to be run by Amazon and Facebook? Essentially, that's the big question that I'm asking myself. And what Zuckerberg says about shops is that it would improve the standard web commerce experience, and by storing users' payment credentials in a single place so that they can use that on Facebook or Instagram or any Instagram storefront. And when I think about Facebook having my payment credentials and their great track record for security and looking after data and not sharing it, I'm thinking this is a play to get the data to play more aggressively in the payment space and to triangulate. Now you can have a locked ecosystem where you don't actually need to go to Google, because you can do everything between WhatsApp, Facebook, and Instagram. And so I think it's a smart strategic move from Facebook. And in the current climate where small businesses, especially if you listen to this in the US, they're desperate. It's just really, really tough times for those types of enterprise. So to be able to use in essence a free platform like Facebook, which they know has scale, and WhatsApp and Instagram, I think for small businesses especially, this is a lifesaver. It's a godsend. It's a really, really huge opportunity for them. And so I think it's a positive from the small business perspective, and actually from Facebook, despite their trust issue. However, that's the biggest thing. How are Facebook going to play in this space? Because I think there's a huge data, business, and margin upside. How much are they going to charge? Are they going to charge more or less than the other platforms? So it's a huge profit generating opportunity. And so I know we'll come to another topic with groups, but for me, the only redeeming thing about this is that Facebook have actually set up an oversight board, and I think they announced that earlier this month. I'm not sure if you talked about it in a prior show, but for me, that's the only check and balance that I can see to protect us from Facebook taking over and doing what they want.
I agree with you in the sense that having one company control so much of our lives is always a problem, and I find Facebook to be incredibly troubling for that reason. But at the same time, the timing of this and the rushing it out at this particular moment when small retailers are struggling seem like a pretty good PR move, right? I mean, Adam, what do you think about that? I mean, it's just like it seems like this was. It might have been in the pipeline for quite a long time. I'm assuming it was. Stuff like this doesn't get just rolled out right away. But the fact that they rushed it out and had it there back pocket and it was there available to help small businesses right now when they needed it most, that's pretty good for them, right?
Yeah, well, you said it's in their back pocket, and I would say, what else is behind their back?
See, he thinks the same. See, he thinks the same as me.
Yeah, Sam, we do think the same, because if you go back to 2007 and looking forward from there, name a time that Facebook made an announcement of a partnership, and I'm talking about journalism, I'm talking about entertainment. Any time that they have reached their hand out and offered an olive branch, there's been a knife that has been waiting to cut that offer off as soon as they get the scale that they want. So it's hard to, maybe for consumers or real Facebook users who spend a lot of time on the platform, or if you're in a small business, and Bob, you're absolutely right. If I was in a small business situation, I would say, oh, that's a lifeline. I'm going to take it. Hey, it's one more thing I could try. Amen. That is good. And maybe this is the time they finally are doing it the right way, but they've burned us so many times that I can't help but be skeptical and cynical, I guess is a better word, because I just know I don't trust Mark Zuckerberg to be the person who is saving small business. I just think he's figuring out, well, ad sales are down, so how can I get those up another 3 cents a minute, over this next 30 days or 60 days.
What about groups? Let's move on to groups here. Alan, what do you think about the group play? They are just so focused on groups. They've been focused on it since January, I think. January is when they started that whole, you can find any kind of group that you can. I think it was the Super Bowl where they first introduced that campaign. And it was right before the pandemic, and now they're really pushing this idea that small groups of people are the best ways to interact on the platform. Now, I've been a huge advocate of groups for years and years and years. I've always felt like it was an underutilized resource by brands in order to cultivate your best fans and to help them to feel like you're part of a special clique of sorts, But I'm wondering, is this move toward groups a good thing for us or a bad thing now that we've had a few months to assess it?
Yeah, I they've been trying for a while on the groups, even though they've put some more effort behind it. I think the challenge is, how many groups can you be part of? How do you manage it? Most people, focus on one or two, and I think what this lockdown is actually got people to some extent into crafting groups on Zoom and experiencing people in a social way that way, not the way Facebook intended of having groups so you can update. And I just think it feels reactionary to me, and I just don't think it's going to magically get people to say, oh my God, I've been using Facebook wrong. I'm just going to flip and create all sorts of groups and have all sorts of interactions with different, friends in different areas. I just think it's too complicated, and most people go for the simple thing and just go online and check what their friends are doing. And I don't think it has a lot of legs.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I mean, even though I'm a huge fan of groups, like I mentioned, I think that they could be useful. I think that there is that breaking point where you have too many groups sending you notifications at one time. And that breaking point is very low. That's a low threshold. It might be I get 3 groups sending me notifications and suddenly I'm turning off all 3, because it's just too much information on top of a news feed, which is already throwing all kinds of data at me. Sam, what's your opinion about groups? Are you in alignment here with Alan, or do you have a different take?
Yeah, I'm pretty much in alignment. I was poking around the last couple of days and just playing around, and particularly, to be honest, on the mobile platform. I was using my phone and my iPad, and just how easy is it to use, what's going on there, how easy it is to turn on and off and navigate. And as I was Nah, I'm good. I'm straight. Thanks though. Thanks Facebook. Thanks for trying. So I think there is that element of if you've got an established, um, if you've established your groups and things elsewhere. For me personally, I'm not seeing the utility and value. I think they have to play. They have to put some dollars behind it because again, you can triangulate other types of engagement. ARPU and time spent and all that kind of thing. So I think there's data benefits and just ultimately monetization benefits of getting people to spend more time and longer time. I just found the ads odd. It was almost saying, hey, we're Facebook and we have all the great cool people on our site using it. Was like they were trying. It was almost there's something off, as if they were trying to be too cool or they're down with the kids when everyone's on TikTok. So I don't know. I think it's perhaps they've kind of masked out their reach and they're trying to find ways to defend that. So I think behind the scenes there's probably some churn happening and they're trying to find a way to shore that up. There was something off about this that I can't quite put my finger on, and maybe in 12 months' time I'll be able to say, aha, I told you so.
It's
Bob.
classic marketing, though, to diversify your appeal to as many audiences as possible. And when you're saying Facebook, it's kind of like has a patina about it that says it's something that 30-year-olds and 40-year-olds and 50-year-olds use. It's got this old type feel. Whereas when you go to groups, you can kind of focus that down to people who are interested in this, people who are interested in that. It seems like it's a brilliant marketing strategy in a lot of ways because it makes the service seem appealing to different groups. I mean, you can almost see the deck when it was first presented to them as a strategy. I mean, it's just like this strategy is just bleeding out all over the place.
So it's a great strategy, wrong brand. For me, it just feels like there's a brand issue, and I can't quite put my finger on it. I just don't think. I think the shops piece is definitely something in their wheelhouse, and I can see that being on brand and being credible. But there's something about groups that feels like some other challenger brand, some other startup will build their $5 billion or $10 billion business, and Facebook will ultimately have to acquire it because they're not going to get traction behind this. That's just my hunch.
Well, with that, it's time for the fair, fail, foul. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do their shameless plug of the week, starting with Alan Adamson. You can find him at metaforce.co. That's the home of Metaforce, his consultancy, brand consultancy. Tell us what's going on in your world, Alan. What would you like to promote?
I think when things are tough, people, the playbook that you used last year is certainly not the playbook you need to use right now. So we're finding our sort of special forces to figure out, all right, if there are one or two things you need to do, what should those things? And then if you don't do it really well, it's invisible, is playing out reasonably well. We've been a virtual agency for 3 years. And so for us, it's not been a big change. And I'm finding more clients now are comfortable or forced to get comfortable with virtual when before it was if you can't come to your office, I may not be interested.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of people on the show have been talking about this being the time to reimagine and try to figure out what you're going to do post the epidemic. Definitely something that you need to look into. And Alan's one of the best in the business, so check him out. Next up, Sam Money. You can find him at marketingtransform.com. That's the home of his consultancy and his podcast, and you can find out more information about him there. Tell us what's going on in your world, Sam. What would you like to promote?
Well, thanks, Bob. Again, you let me shamelessly plug my podcast on this show, which I co-host with a buddy of mine, Chris Lawson. And what makes us different, why this podcast is a must listen, is because you not only have me as one Brit, you have a second Brit. That's right, 2 Brits for the price of 1. Actually, for the price of 3, because you can get it for free. He's based in the UK and I'm based here, and we are literally across the pond, and we talk about Marketing Transformed at marketingtransform.com. So go check it out, and we talk about all of marketing transformation issues. And actually, of late, we've been up all in our feels. We've been up in our feelings of late. And the last few shows have been about the reset, about the future of work. We've talked about leading with compassion and strength. And we've also talked about well-being being the priority. So really making it touchy-feely from a very British perspective, which you have to listen to find out more. So check us out. And if you want to follow me, I'm at samuelmoney.com. Or at Samuel Money on all the socials. But again, Marketing Transformed, enjoying it. Episode 36 comes out this week.
That's an accomplishment. Stick-to-itiveness is a rare commodity in podcasts, so I love that you're still plugging away at it. Now, next up, we have Adam Pierno. You can find him at adampierno.com. That's where you can get information about his books and about his life and about everything else that has to do with Adam. So tell us what's going on in your world, Adam. What would you like to promote?
I don't have Sam's energy. So, Samuel, I'm sorry. This is going to be a bring down compared to your pitch that you just gave us. But last time I was on, Bob, I gave listeners a chance to download my new book, Specific, for free, absolutely no cost. This time, I'm going to make my first book, Underthink It, free. If you go to adampierno.com, you'll see on the homepage a little button you can click, fill out a form, no strings attached if you don't want. You can download. I'll send you a copy of the book. And or you can go to my Twitter, at apierno, and there'll be a pinned tweet there where you can get a link directly to that page.
Great. That's awesome. Thank you very much for doing that. And as for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me about getting your brand's podcast off the ground. And you can even find out how to advertise on this program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul, a rundown of the best and worst of advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. First up, it was a tough race for me. I mean, I already mentioned the Schick head-shaving video game, but I think I'm going to go with the Fair of the Week being German Burger King. The Burger King Germany did a social distancing crown promotion. Very akin to what we were seeing, Adam, out of like the shores, the beaches, where they were putting together social distancing with inner tubes around people to keep people apart from each other. They made 6-foot crowns that you could get and wear to keep yourself socially distanced from people when you were eating at a Burger King. I thought this was really clever, kind of cute, completely unscalable, but very fun and made for some great pictures.
It is a much more fun way to do the separated logos that we saw 90 days ago or 70 days ago. It's a visual that you really want to look at. It's very shareable. And I can't help when I see it, I think of a comically large sombrero more than a crown.
Yeah,
but I did
right.
enjoy it.
Yeah, it does look like a sombrero, so I don't know if it's going to be a foul or something offensive, but it was, when you look at it, for me, I have to concur, it was so on equity for Burger King. So there's some brands which have got their groove, they got their mojo, and it just feels like that brand and the CMO there, they've been doing well. They're kind of completely on brand, and it does kind of it's a bit of a twinkle in the eye, a bit of smile in your face.
Yeah, their equity is almost always like boiled down to tone now, and they just keep crushing it and repeating that same tonality.
That's really insightful. Well, the fail of the week, it comes from Volkswagen, who is forced to apologize for what is inarguably one of the most painfully racist ads I've seen in a long time, Sam. I mean, it's just like they show a woman's hand flicking away a black man from a car in front of a thing that said something to the effect of Petite Cologne or whatever, which is like the little colonist. And then even did a little racial slur at the end of the ad. And then when they were confronted with it, played dumb and said, "I can't believe you would think that we were being racist here." And I'm like, what is wrong with Volkswagen?
Well, it was you missed the one context clue was there was the white woman's hand flicking the black guy essentially, and it was all sorts of wrong, and it went to market. So I'm just adding this. This is a great scoreboard I'm capturing. So there's going to be 5 brands which do this year, and I think they're probably the first one or two. They're going to be added to the video reel of all the brands who were offended, and then also the people who come out and say what was wrong with that. There was nothing wrong with it, and I just think this is going to continue to happen until you have cultural, ethnic, gender, race diversity in socioeconomic diversity in the leadership decision-making roles. It's going to continue to happen. So as I say, I've got my it's like a bingo card ready for all the different brands who are going to make the same mistakes because they don't change their leadership and decision makers. So this is going to keep happening.
Great points. Well, the foul of the week comes from the New York Times article mocking the "We Salute You" ads. Now, we've been making fun of these for a while, Alan, on the show. I think someone said something to the effect a couple weeks ago. as soon as you hear that piano music coming on, you know to just duck and cover because something bad's going to come on the screen right after it. These ads that say "We salute you" are not really saluting anybody. I think the article's main point was that it's kind of like saying that you're going to do something but not really doing anything to put meat on the bone. There's no action behind it. There's no change in behavior. It's just kind of like, we're all for you, but we're safe here in our nice little quarantined houses and not having to go out there and be with you. So what's your take on this?
Yeah, I agree. It was for the first 2 or 3 weeks, advertisers couldn't run the old copy because it was completely irrelevant. And so lots of them jumped on the bandwagon and said, we're here for you. We're all in this together. We salute you. And for a couple of weeks, you could ignore it. And then, of course, it continued. And it is really a waste and potentially damaging to the brands. Some of the smarter marketers now have pivoted to look at insights and connect to how people feel. And everything from the latest Budweiser things that has Clydesdales running free, which gets into how people are really feeling. They want to be a horse running free across the Brooklyn Bridge. So some of them are doing some smart stuff, but the ones that are on autopilot are really damaging or potentially damaging their relationship with customers.
They remembered the situational relevance, but they forgot to add the relevance to their brand or the context of what the product they're selling. So it all just washes together in a 4-minute ad pod. It's the same ad 4 times in a row, or it just feels like it's extended out 240 seconds.
For me, the real foul, though, is not the fact that brands are doing this, but that the fact that the ad press, including us, have been mocking it for a number of weeks, and now it's bled into a mainstream newspaper critique, and the New York Times is making fun of it. That's where you know that this has gotten to critical mass as a problem, and it's something that really needs to be addressed, and it should have been addressed by smart marketers weeks ago.
Well, the smart marketers aren't making the decisions, Bob, and because the CEO now realizes that for their ego, they have to be in an ad. So now the ad featuring the CEO saluting people has to happen because someone said yes to them like 3-4 weeks ago, and no one's got the guts to say this is always a bad idea. We shouldn't do it. And so I think a lot of this now is sameness in order to show that you've got your version, and it's going to happen for another few more weeks until someone has the guts to say, let's cut that, let's not do that, and let's actually tap into what consumers care about and really solve those problems.
Well, have a suggestion for this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag FairFailFoul. That's #FairFailFoul. And that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcasts listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Just like, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah.
Cool beans.